Have you ever tossed and turned all night, watched the clock tick past 3 a.m., and wondered, what would really happen if I just never slept? Not for one night, or two, but indefinitely? We've all been tired, but the journey your body and mind embark on without any sleep is a bizarre and dangerous roller coaster. It's a trip from simple fatigue to full-blown hallucinations, and ultimately, to a complete system shutdown. Welcome to the channel. Before we dive into this incredible journey, do us a favor. If you find this kind of deep dive fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We explore the incredible science of the human body every day, and we don't want you to miss a thing. Also, I'm always curious, where in the world are you watching this, and what time is it for you right now? Drop a comment and let me know. Let's see just how global our community of the curious really is. Now, let's get comfortable, and let's talk about what happens when you simply stop sleeping. Imagine it's late on a Sunday night. You're in bed, but you're not sleeping. You've decided to start a wild, unofficial experiment to see how long you can stay awake. The first few hours are easy, familiar territory for anyone who's ever pulled an all-nighter. By 2 a.m., you might feel a little restless, maybe a bit hungry. Your brain is still functioning relatively well, but the initial signs are there. You might feel less alert than you were a few hours ago. Research has shown that after just 18 hours awake, your level of impairment can be similar to someone with a blood alcohol content of 0.05%. The party in your brain is just getting started, and the first guest to leave is your sharp focus. As the sun rises on your first sleepless morning, you're running on 24 hours without rest. This is a milestone. At this point, your body is essentially in a state of crisis. According to the Cleveland Clinic and other health sources, your reaction time is measurably slower, your speech might start to get a little slurred, and your decision-making is impaired. In fact, staying awake for 20 to 25 hours can affect your focus as much as having a blood alcohol level of 0.1%. That's over the legal limit for driving in most places. Your coordination suffers, you might have trouble hearing clearly or seeing properly, and your hand might develop a slight tremor. The body is already beginning to protest, but the real psychological drama is still a day or two away. You push through the first day. It's tough. You're irritable, cranky, and everything feels like an effort. But you make it to 36 hours. Now, the system-wide stress is becoming undeniable. Your body, in a panic, ramps up production of cortisol, the primary stress hormone. This hormonal imbalance can affect everything from your mood to your appetite, and you might even experience chills or fluctuations in your body temperature. Your brain is struggling to form new memories or even access old ones reliably. Your attention span is now pathetically short, and you find it difficult to learn or process any new information. You are exhausted, but paradoxically, you might also feel a strange, wired energy that keeps you from just giving in and closing your eyes. The oxygen intake in your body can even decrease at this stage, adding a physical strain to the mental fatigue. Then comes the 48-hour mark. 2 full days without a single minute of sleep. This is where the line between waking and dreaming begins to blur in a very literal sense. Your body will now force what are known as microsleeps upon you. These are brief, uncontrollable lapses in consciousness that can last from a mere second to half a minute. You might be staring at a wall, or in the middle of a sentence, and suddenly your brain just checks out. You come to a few seconds later, confused and disoriented, with no memory of the lapse. Your immune system is also taking a serious hit. The body's natural defenses against infections are faltering, making you a prime target for every passing cold or virus. If you manage to fight through the microsleeps and push on to 72 hours, 3 days, the world starts to break down in truly frightening ways. This is the gateway to psychosis. This is a place very few people have ever been, and it's where the experiment on your own mind takes a truly dramatic and frightening turn. The person you were just 3 days ago feels like a distant memory, a well-rested ghost from a past life. What you are experiencing now is a fundamental breakdown of reality, a state where your brain, in its desperate cry for rest, begins to betray you in ways that are both bizarre and terrifying. Let's start with the hallucinations, because they are often the most immediate and shocking sign that things are going wrong. Now, you might have experienced mild visual tricks after just 24 hours, maybe seeing shadows dart out of the corner of your eye or a brief sense that the room shifted size. But at the 72-hour point, these are no longer simple tricks. They are full-blown, complex hallucinations that can engage all your senses. The most common are visual hallucinations. We're not just talking about seeing a floating speck of dust and mistaking it for a fly. We're talking about your brain constructing entire people, animals, or scenes from nothing. One individual who stayed awake for over 100 hours described seeing zombies run at her in the street, watching cars float, and feeling like the shelves in a supermarket were leaning in, about to fall on her. Another person, in a classroom, vividly saw their professor's hair grow several feet in a matter of seconds and then witnessed an imaginary man walk in and stab her, a vision so real it prompted a panic response before it vanished. But it doesn't stop with sight. Your sense of touch can also turn against you. This is known as a tactile hallucination, and one of the most common and unsettling forms is formication, the sensation of insects crawling on or just underneath your skin. Imagine trying to hold a conversation or simply sit still while you feel a persistent, prickly, itchy feeling of tiny legs marching up your arms or across your back. It's a sensation that drove one sleep-deprived student to constantly scratch at her legs, unable to concentrate on anything else. Less commonly, but just as disturbingly, you might experience auditory hallucinations. This could be hearing your name called when no one is there, or listening to a faint, indistinguishable music, or even hearing full, clear voices that comment on your actions or speak directly to you. When your brain is hallucinating in multiple senses at once, seeing a shadowy figure, hearing it whispers, and feeling a cold hand on your shoulder, the line between what is real and what is a creation of your exhausted mind becomes impossibly thin. This multisensory assault is a key reason why the experience at 72 hours is so often described as a descent into a dreamlike state while you are still awake. Now, why does this happen? What is actually going on inside your skull to cause this spectacular failure of perception? Scientists believe there are a few key mechanisms at play. First, there's the simple buildup of waste. Think of your waking brain as a bustling factory. As it works hard all day, it produces metabolic waste products, one of which is a chemical called adenosine. Sleep is the essential cleaning crew that comes in at night to sweep this waste away. When you don't sleep, the adenosine keeps building up, and this buildup is thought to directly interfere with normal brain communication, essentially clogging the works and leading to misfires that we experience as hallucinations. Another fascinating and slightly frightening concept is the mixed state of consciousness. Your brain is so desperately tired that different parts of it start to fall asleep at different times, even while you are technically awake and your eyes are open. You might have experienced a tiny version of this while studying late at night, when you suddenly zone out for a few seconds. At 72 hours without sleep, this isn't just a momentary lapse. Parts of your brain responsible for logical, waking thought might be online, while the parts that process visual information or regulate your sense of reality have partially shut down and entered a dream state. This creates a chaotic hybrid of waking and dreaming where the vivid, illogical narratives of your dreams are projected directly onto your waking world. It's like your brain's projector is playing two different films at once onto the same screen. Furthermore, this extreme exhaustion disrupts the delicate balance of neurotransmitters, the brain's chemical messengers. There's evidence that sleep deprivation can lead to an increase in dopamine, a neurotransmitter often associated with reward and motivation, but which in excess can also contribute to psychosis and hallucinations. So, it's not just one thing going wrong, it's a perfect storm of chemical imbalance, neurological garbage disposal failure, and a brain that's so tired it's starting to shut down in patches, all combining to create a reality that is fundamentally unstable. But the distortions aren't just about what you see and hear. Your very sense of self and your connection to the world begin to fray. This is where we encounter feelings of depersonalization and derealization. Depersonalization is the bizarre and unsettling feeling that you are detached from your own body and mind, almost as if you are watching yourself from the outside, like an actor in a movie. You might look at your own hands and feel a strange disconnect, as if they don't quite belong to you. Your own thoughts might not feel like your own. Derealization, its close cousin, is the persistent feeling that the world around you is unreal, foggy, or artificial. The people you talk to might seem like lifeless automatons, or the environment might feel like a flimsy movie set. This, combined with the hallucinations, creates a profound and terrifying sense of isolation. Alongside this, paranoia often takes root. Your brain, struggling to make sense of its own chaotic internal signals and the distorted external world, starts looking for patterns and threats where there are none. A casual glance from a stranger can feel like a menacing glare. The hum of a refrigerator can sound like whispered plotting. You might become convinced, on a deep and unshakable level, that people are against you, that you are in danger, or that you are the subject of a grand, complex conspiracy. This isn't just simple suspicion, it's a delusion, a fixed false belief that feels absolutely real to you, even in the face of clear evidence to the contrary. After about 72 hours awake, these delusions become a common feature of the landscape, and they mark the point where the clinical picture begins to closely resemble acute psychosis, or a toxic delirium. Your ability to think, the very tool you are using to understand these words right now, is utterly compromised. This is what experts call disordered thinking. Your thoughts become sluggish, jumbled, and illogical. Holding a simple train of thought, like following a recipe or remembering the steps to get home, becomes a Herculean task. Your working memory, the mental notepad you use to hold a phone number in your head for a few seconds, fails you constantly. You might start a sentence and forget how it ends halfway through. Trying to solve a simple problem or do basic math feels like trying to run a marathon with your legs tied together. This cognitive collapse makes it impossible to function normally, and crucially, it robs you of the ability to rationally question the bizarre things you are seeing and feeling. The hat phenomenon, you mentioned, that sensation of a tight band of pressure around the head, is a classic, almost quaint-sounding symptom reported in many historical sleep deprivation studies. It's a physical manifestation of the immense strain your entire nervous system is under, a constant, uncomfortable reminder that your brain is operating under a state of extreme duress. All of this is wrapped in a blanket of intense and labile emotions. The irritability you felt on day one has now blossomed into full-blown anxiety and a depressed mood. You can swing from feelings of euphoria, a brief, irrational high, to deep despair and back again in moments, all while the background music of paranoia and fear continues to play. So, when we say the person you were 72 hours ago is gone, replaced by a paranoid, exhausted shell, we mean that the very architecture of your consciousness has been temporarily, but dramatically, reshaped by the relentless need for sleep. You are teetering on the edge of reality because your brain, the organ that constructs your reality, is in a state of mutiny. It's a frightening place to be, but it's also a powerful testament to one simple, inescapable fact: sleep is not a luxury. It is a non-negotiable biological requirement for a sane and stable mind. Now let's talk about the ultimate question: when do you die? This is the part where the science gets fuzzy, and for good reason. We simply do not have a clear, hour-by-hour countdown to death from total sleep deprivation in humans because it is torturous and unethical to study. Now, let's pull up a chair and get cozy, because the story of what happens when humans and animals are pushed to the absolute limit of sleeplessness is one of the most fascinating and cautionary tales in all of science. You see, when we left off, we were talking about the truly frightening breakdown of reality that happens around the 72-hour mark. But what happens after that? How long can this go on? Well, the most famous case that gives us a glimpse into this extreme territory comes from a high school student just trying to win a science fair. Back in December of 1963, a 17-year-old named Randy Gardner decided he was going to break the world record for staying awake. His goal was to stay awake for 11 whole days, and he did it. He stayed awake for 264 hours, which is 11 days and 25 minutes, to be precise. Now, just let that sink in for a moment. 11 days. That's over a week and a half of continuous, unbroken wakefulness. It's an almost unimaginable feat, and it's a record that still stands out not just for its duration, but for how carefully it was watched and documented by real sleep researchers from Stanford University and doctors from the U.S. Navy. This wasn't just a stunt, it became a serious, and somewhat accidental, scientific observation. So, what was it like for Randy? Well, as you can imagine, it was an absolute roller coaster of declining mental and physical function. In the early days, he felt relatively okay, but as the experiment dragged on, things started to get weird. He became incredibly nauseous, and that nausea stuck with him for nearly the entire ordeal. He had terrible mood swings, becoming really irritable, and he found it harder and harder to remember simple things. It got so bad that he later described it as being almost like an early Alzheimer's thing brought on by lack of sleep. Can you imagine that? A teenager experiencing something that feels like Alzheimer's? That's the power of sleep deprivation. He started having hallucinations, seeing things that weren't there, and at one point, he even became convinced he was a famous football player, even though he was a skinny kid. His senses were thrown completely out of whack, his speech became slurred, and his coordination deteriorated, making simple tasks a real struggle. One of the most telling moments came on the last day when a doctor asked him to perform a simple mental task, to start at 100 and subtract 7 over and over again. He began 193.86, but he suddenly stopped at 65. When the doctor asked him why he had stopped, Randy had completely forgotten what he was even doing. His brain, in its exhausted state, simply couldn't hold on to the simple instructions. Now, you might hear that and think he was physically falling apart, but interestingly, he later said that the physical part wasn't the main problem. It was the mental part that went completely downhill. Now, here's a really crucial part of this story, and it tells us a lot about how our bodies and brains work. After all that, after 11 days of no sleep, what happened? Did he have to sleep for days on end to recover? Well, he was taken to a naval hospital. They hooked him up to machines to check his brain waves, and medically, he was declared perfectly healthy. He then slept for 14 hours and 46 minutes, woke up naturally, stayed awake for a while, and then slept for another 10.5 hours. And after that, follow-up checks weeks later showed no significant differences. He seemed to have recovered fully, at least in the short term. He and his friends even won first place at the San Diego Science Fair. But this is where the story gets a little more complicated, and where we have to be careful about the messages we take from it. Decades later, Randy Gardner reported that he started suffering from serious insomnia, where he would lie in bed for 5 or 6 hours and maybe only sleep for 15 minutes. Now, we can't say for sure that his teenage experiment caused this later life insomnia, and science can't draw a straight line between the two, but he himself has wondered if it was a kind of karmic payback for what he put his body through all those years ago. His story is the most well-documented, but it's important to know that his record was eventually broken by others. A man named Robert McDonald reportedly stayed awake for 18 days and 21 hours later on. But this leads us to a very important decision made by the people who keep track of these things. The organization known as Guinness World Records, the famous book that catalogs all kinds of incredible human achievements, has officially stopped recognizing and tracking records for sleep deprivation. They stopped doing this back in 1996, and the reason is simple and very telling. They cited the inherent dangers involved. Think about that phrase for a second. Inherent dangers. It means the dangers are a fundamental, built-in part of the activity itself. You can't do it without risking harm. The editor-in-chief of Guinness World Records, Craig Glendy, explained it beautifully. He said that sleep is one of those key, absolute, fundamental parts of human nature, and that we need our sleep. By allowing people to compete to see who could go the longest without this fundamental necessity, they were essentially encouraging people to harm themselves. It's not like seeing who can eat the most hot dogs or who can grow the longest fingernails. This is about a biological process that is essential for life. Guinness has a list of record categories they no longer accept, and along with things like rapid alcohol consumption or records that are harmful to animals, they have placed voluntary sleep deprivation firmly on that list. This decision, in and of itself, is a powerful statement from the global authority on records. Going without sleep is not an achievement to be celebrated. It is a risky behavior that tampers with the very core of our biology. But to really understand just how dangerous a complete lack of sleep can be, we have to look beyond voluntary record attempts and look at a truly terrifying and rare genetic disease. This is where the story takes a dark turn, but it's a turn that teaches us an invaluable lesson. The disease is called fatal familial insomnia, or FFI for short. It's an incredibly rare condition, passed down through families, caused by a specific genetic mutation. What this mutation does is cause an abnormal protein to build up in the brain, specifically in a region called the thalamus, which plays a critical role in regulating sleep. This buildup progressively destroys the brain's ability to sleep. It's not that the patients don't want to sleep, their brains literally lose the capability. The disease is, as the name so starkly points out, invariably fatal. Most patients die within an average of just 18 months from the onset of the disease. Imagine that. A year and a half of progressively losing the ability to sleep, and then death. The progression of the disease is heartbreaking. Patients start by having trouble falling asleep, suffering from increasing panic attacks and phobias. Then, as the insomnia becomes total, they experience a rapid and severe decline in both their mental and physical abilities. They may experience dramatic weight loss, their autonomic nervous system goes haywire, leading to high blood pressure and irregular heart rates, and they end up in a state of seeming stupor or dementia before passing away. There is no cure. This tragic disease provides us with the clearest, most direct evidence in humans that a complete lack of sleep, over a long enough period, is not something you can just power through. It is lethal. It shows us that while staying awake for a week or two, as in Randy Gardner's case, might be survivable for a healthy person, going without sleep for months is simply not compatible with life. And if the human evidence from FFI isn't enough to convince us of sleep's absolute necessity, we can turn to the animal studies, which paint a grimmer and even more immediate picture. Scientists have conducted experiments, notably in rats, to see what happens with total sleep deprivation. In a landmark study conducted in the late 1980s, researchers kept rats awake constantly. How did they manage that? They used a method where the rat is placed on a disc over a shallow tray of water. Whenever the rat's brainwaves indicated it was starting to fall asleep, the disc would automatically rotate, forcing the rat to walk to avoid falling into the water. It's a harsh method, but it allowed for complete control over sleep. The results were stark and unforgettable. The rats, no matter what, died after being kept awake for between 11 and 32 days. They didn't just get sick and recover, they died. And the cause of death wasn't immediately obvious from the outside. It wasn't like they just collapsed from exhaustion. When the scientists performed autopsies, they found that the rats' bodies had completely broken down. Their fur had lost its healthy appearance, they had developed sores on their paws and tails, and they had experienced extreme weight loss despite eating more food. Their body's ability to regulate temperature was gone, and their immune systems had crashed, leaving them open to rampant infection. Their systems for managing metabolism and stress had been utterly overwhelmed. Their bodies had essentially burned out from the constant demand of being awake, with no time for repair, restoration, or rejuvenation. The exact trigger for death was a mystery, but it was clear that every major system in their bodies had failed because of the lack of sleep. So, when you put all of this together, the harrowing psychological descent of Randy Gardner, the conscious decision by Guinness to stop promoting this kind of behavior because of its inherent dangers, the heartbreaking and fatal progression of fatal familial insomnia, and the stark mortality of sleep-deprived rats, the message becomes crystal clear. It's a message that science has been shouting from the rooftops for decades. Sleep is not a luxury. It's not something you can skip to get more work done or to have more fun. It's not something you can catch up on later without any consequences. It is a non-negotiable biological necessity for survival. It is as vital to our health as the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat. Our brains need it to think clearly, form memories, and regulate our emotions. Our bodies need it to repair muscles, synthesize hormones, and fight off disease. It is the foundation upon which our entire well-being is built. To ignore sleep is to ignore the most basic operating instruction of the human body. So, the next time you think about staying up just that little bit longer, remember Randy Gardner forgetting how to subtract, remember the tragic patience of FFI, and remember the rats on that rotating disc. And then, give yourself permission to turn out the light, close your eyes, and drift off into the peaceful, restorative, and absolutely essential embrace of sleep. So, while I can't tell you that you will drop dead at the 240-hour mark, I can tell you that the path you're on is unsustainable and lethally dangerous. After about 3 days, your risk of having a fatal accident, whether from a microsleep while driving or a bad decision born of impaired judgment, skyrockets. Your body's systems begin to fail. Your heart and circulatory system are under immense strain, significantly increasing your risk of hypertension and heart disease. Your metabolic systems break down, raising your risk of developing type 2 diabetes. Your brain loses its ability to clear out toxic waste products, like beta-amyloid proteins, which are associated with Alzheimer's disease. The body is a complex machine, and sleep is its essential, non-negotiable maintenance period. Without it, the machine will inevitably break down. So, we've been on this wild and frankly terrifying journey through the extremes of total sleep deprivation, a place of hallucinations and system breakdown. But here's the thing, and this is perhaps the most important message for all of us: the danger isn't just in pulling a few dramatic, sleep-free all-nighters. The real, insidious risk, the one that affects millions of people going about their daily lives, is the slow, steady drip of not quite getting enough sleep, night after night after night. It's the chronic sleep debt, the "I'll just manage on 5 or 6 hours" mentality, that weaves a thread of risk through the fabric of your long-term health. And we know this not just from scary, one-off experiments, but from massive, population-wide studies that look at the sleep habits and health outcomes of hundreds of thousands, even millions, of people over many years. This is the science of epidemiology, and it gives us a powerful, wide-angle lens on how our daily choices, including sleep, play out over a lifetime. Let's talk about one of these monumental studies, a type of research called a meta-analysis. Now, a meta-analysis is like the ultimate summary. It doesn't just look at one small study, it gathers data from many, many different studies from all over the world and pulls it all together to find the overall, big-picture trend. It's the scientific equivalent of getting a bird's-eye view of a forest, rather than just examining one single tree. The one we're focusing on was a real behemoth. It included data from over 1.3 million participants. Just let that number sink in for a moment. 1.3 million individual lives, their sleep habits tracked, their health outcomes monitored. That's an enormous amount of data, and it gives the findings a tremendous amount of weight and credibility. It's hard to argue with a pattern that emerges from a pool of people that large. What this giant study found was something truly fascinating and crucial for all of us to understand. It revealed that people who consistently, regularly sleep for less than 6 hours a night, what the researchers call short sleep duration, face a 12% greater risk of death from all causes compared to people who get that golden 7 to 8 hours. Now, a 12% greater risk might not sound like a huge, dramatic number at first. You might be thinking, well, that doesn't seem so bad. But let's put that into plain language. Think of it this way: if you imagine 100 people who get a healthy amount of sleep, and you compare them to 100 people who are consistently short sleeping, the group of short sleepers over time would see 12 more deaths from any and all causes, be it heart disease, stroke, cancer, accidents, you name it. This isn't a risk for one specific disease. It's a blanket increase in risk for dying prematurely from anything. That's a significant shift. It means that chronic short sleep makes you more vulnerable across the board. It's like your body's overall resilience is being steadily eroded, night by restless night. But the story gets even more interesting, and a little counterintuitive. The same massive study found that people who consistently sleep more than 9 hours a night, what's termed long sleep duration face an even higher risk. This group showed a 30% greater risk of death from all causes. Now, that's a really substantial jump. 30%. That's a finding that often makes people sit up and say, "Wait a second, I thought more sleep was supposed to be good for you." And this is where the science gets really nuanced and requires us to think a little deeper. This creates what scientists call a U-shaped relationship between sleep duration and mortality risk. Imagine a little drawing of a U, or a smile, if you will. On the left side of the U, at the short end, the risk is high. As you move towards the center, the bottom of the U, the risk goes down, reaching its lowest point at that ideal 7 to 8 hour range. Then, as you move to the right, to the long sleep side, the risk starts to climb back up again. It's a curve, showing that the safest, healthiest place to be is right in the middle. This is the beautiful, simple truth that scientists have nicknamed the Goldilocks phenomenon of sleep. You remember the story of Goldilocks and the three bears, right? She didn't want the porridge that was too hot or too cold. She wanted the one that was just right. She didn't want the bed that was too hard or too soft. She wanted the one that was just right. Well, it turns out our bodies are a lot like Goldilocks when it comes to sleep. We don't function well with too little, and we don't function well with too much. We need the amount that is just right for our individual biology, which for the vast majority of adults is that 7 to 9 hour sweet spot. This isn't just a cute analogy. It's a robust statistical pattern that has been observed in study after study after study, all around the world. Now let's dive into the why behind these numbers. Why does consistently short sleep shave years off your life? Well, it's not one single thing. It's a cascade of problems, a slow-motion system failure. Think of each night of sleep as a mandatory maintenance shift for your body's factory. If you keep cutting that maintenance shift short, things start to break down. First, your cardiovascular system takes a hit. During deep sleep, your heart rate slows down, your blood pressure drops, and your blood vessels get a chance to relax and repair. When you shortchange yourself on sleep, your body spends more time in a state of high alert, with stress hormones like cortisol staying elevated. This puts constant, unnecessary strain on your heart and blood vessels. Over years, this contributes to hypertension, hardening of the arteries, and a significantly higher risk of heart attacks and strokes. It's like forcing your heart to run a marathon every single day without a break. Then there's your metabolic health, which is all about how your body processes energy. Sleep deprivation throws a wrench into this delicate system. It messes with the hormones that control your appetite. It causes your body to produce more ghrelin, the hormone that screams, "I'm hungry," and less leptin, the hormone that gently says, "I'm full." This is why after a bad night's sleep, you often find yourself craving sugary, fatty, high-carb foods. Your brain is desperately seeking a quick energy fix. Furthermore, sleep deprivation makes your body less sensitive to insulin, the hormone that ushers sugar from your bloodstream into your cells for energy. When you're insulin resistant, your blood sugar levels rise, and your pancreas has to work overtime, pumping out more and more insulin. This is a direct pathway to weight gain and ultimately, type 2 diabetes. So, that habit of getting only 5 or 6 hours of sleep isn't just making you tired. It's actively reprogramming your metabolism to store fat and struggle with blood sugar control. And we can't forget the brain. While you sleep, your brain isn't just offline. It's busy doing essential housekeeping. It's flushing out toxic waste products that accumulate during the day, like beta-amyloid proteins, which are the very same proteins that form the sticky plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease. When you don't get enough deep, restorative sleep, this cleaning process gets short-circuited. Those toxins start to build up, potentially increasing your long-term risk for cognitive decline and neurodegenerative diseases. At the same time, sleep is when your brain consolidates memories, transferring them from short-term storage to long-term storage. When you cut sleep short, you're essentially robbing your brain of the chance to file away the day's learning, making it harder to remember things and learn new skills. Chronic short sleep is also a major contributor to mood disorders like anxiety and depression. An exhausted brain is an emotionally fragile brain, more prone to negativity, and less able to cope with daily stressors. So, the 12% increased mortality risk from short sleep isn't from one magical thing. It's the accumulated toll of a heart under pressure, a metabolism in chaos, a brain clogged with toxins, and an immune system that's constantly losing the battle. It's death by 1,000 cuts, with each night of insufficient sleep being another tiny, barely perceptible slice. Now, let's turn to the other side of the U-shaped curve, the long sleepers. Why would sleeping too much be associated with a whopping 30% greater risk? This is the part that often confuses people. The leading theory among scientists isn't that long sleep itself causes early death. Rather, it's that consistently needing 9, 10, or more hours of sleep per night is very often a red flag, a powerful marker or symptom of an underlying serious health condition. Think of it like a fever. A fever doesn't cause an infection, it's your body's signal that it's fighting one. In the same way, hypersomnia, or excessive sleepiness, can be your body's signal that something is wrong. What kind of underlying conditions? Well, a number of them. Depression and other mental health disorders are strongly linked to a desire to sleep excessively. It's a form of escape and withdrawal. Sleep disorders like sleep apnea, where your breathing repeatedly stops and starts throughout the night, can lead to extremely poor quality sleep. Even though someone with untreated sleep apnea might be in bed for 9 or 10 hours, their brain is never allowed to sink into the deep, restorative stages of sleep. So, their body craves more sleep in a futile attempt to catch up on what it's missing, leading to long hours in bed but persistent exhaustion. Other conditions like hypothyroidism, an underactive thyroid, chronic fatigue syndrome, and certain neurological disorders can also cause profound fatigue and a need for extended sleep. Furthermore, when researchers dig into the data, they find that the association between long sleep and higher mortality is strongest in people with lower socioeconomic status and those who are unemployed or have poor health. This suggests that the need for long sleep can be a consequence of poor overall health, rather than the cause of it. So, that 30% increased risk is largely interpreted as long sleep being a canary in the coal mine, a warning sign that the body is already struggling with a significant health challenge that needs medical attention. It's not that the extra sleep is killing people, it's that the thing making them need all that extra sleep is the real culprit. So, what's the grand takeaway from all this number crunching on 1.3 million people? It's that sleep is a fundamental pillar of health, and like any pillar, it needs to be just the right size. Too little, and the entire structure becomes unstable, prone to crumbling over time from the relentless pressure of modern life. Too much, and it can be a sign that the structure is already compromised and in need of serious inspection. The goal, then, is to listen to your body, aim for that consistent 7 to 9 hour window, and establish a rhythm that allows for true, high-quality restoration. It's about making sleep a non-negotiable priority, not an afterthought you sacrifice on the altar of productivity or late-night entertainment. Because the most compelling science we have tells us a simple, inescapable truth. When it comes to a long and healthy life, your sleep needs to be, quite simply, just right. So, as we reach the end of our wakeful, and frankly, terrifying journey, the message is simple and clear: sleep is not optional. It's a pillar of health, as crucial as a good diet and regular exercise. It's when your body heals, your brain files away memories, and your entire system resets. So please value your sleep. Protect it. Make time for it. And with that, it's time for me to say goodnight. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Wherever you are in the world, whatever the hour on your clock, I hope you have a restful, peaceful, and deeply rejuvenating night's sleep. Sweet dreams.